In the vibrant city of Jacksonville, Florida, tucked away in the northeast corner of the state, the Miller family was a name that commanded respect. Mark and Ruth Miller weren't just well known for their charm, they were the proud owners of one of the largest cold storage companies in town, Crystal Free Storage. What the community didn't know, however, was that Ruth was the true mastermind behind it all. Long before she married Mark, Ruth had built the company from the ground up, making it the successful business it was. But out of love and respect for her husband, Ruth quietly placed his name as the public face, never seeking the recognition she truly deserved. She wanted nothing more than to support Mark, to make him feel valued as the leader of their family. Little did they know, this quiet sacrifice would eventually lead to a storm that would shake their family to its core. A storm that began with the loss of Mark, and one that Ruth would have to face alone, as her son Lucas, unwittingly manipulated by a new force in their lives, began to drift further from her. Ruth Miller's contribution to the success of Crystal Free Storage was profound, yet she always stayed in the background, letting Mark take the spotlight. Despite being the one who had built the company from scratch, Ruth made a quiet decision early on to place Mark's name as the public face of their business. She never sought accolades or recognition for her hard work. Instead, she wanted Mark to feel the pride and accomplishment of leading their family's legacy. For Ruth, marriage was about partnership, and she never wanted to overshadow her husband's role. She believed in supporting him, not just as a spouse, but as a pillar of their shared dreams, and it was this deep sense of love and respect that guided her every action. Theirs was a marriage built on mutual respect and a shared vision of a bright future. But there was one thing missing: children. Ruth especially longed for the day they would become parents. They tried for years, and though the doctors reassured them that there was no medical reason for their childlessness, the pain of waiting wore on Ruth's heart. Despite the sadness she felt, she kept the dream alive and never let it affect her loving relationship with Mark. Then, after 3 long years, their prayers were answered when Ruth discovered she was pregnant. The joy that flooded their home was indescribable. Their son, Lucas, was born healthy and full of life. Ruth poured all her nurturing love into raising him, determined to make him strong, kind, and ambitious. As Lucas grew, it was clear that he had inherited not just his father's charisma, but Ruth's work ethic and sense of responsibility. She ensured that Lucas had the best education and guidance, shaping him into a respectful young man with a strong sense of humility, always putting family first. Through Ruth's nurturing care, Lucas became everything she had hoped for: an intelligent, compassionate young man with the potential to carry on the family legacy. The day Mark Miller died was the day Ruth's world crumbled. The news came suddenly, like a storm ripping through her life. Mark, the love of her life, the man she had built everything with, was gone in an instant. A tragic plane crash took him away, and with it, the dreams they had shared. The pain was unbearable, a wound that seemed too deep to heal. Their home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now echoed with silence. The entire community of Jacksonville mourned his loss. Mark was not just a successful businessman, but a beloved figure, respected for his kindness, his generosity, and his dedication. But for Ruth, the grief went beyond the loss of a partner. It was the loss of their shared vision, their future together, and the man who had always been her rock. And yet, even in the midst of her sorrow, Ruth knew she had to be strong. For Lucas, her son too was devastated by the sudden loss of his father, his role model and guiding light. But Lucas, with his father's business acumen and his mother's resilience, quickly stepped up to take charge of Crystal Free Storage. His grief weighed heavily on him, but his sense of duty to honor Mark's legacy was stronger. Ruth watched from the sidelines, offering her quiet support, making sure he had everything he needed, but always in the background, just as she had done throughout their marriage. Lucas worked tirelessly to keep the company running, never once faltering in his commitment to uphold the standards his father had set. Ruth's heart swelled with pride for the man Lucas had become, but there was a bitter sweetness to it. She had hoped to share this moment with Mark. Still, she knew she had to step back and let Lucas take his place as the leader, as she had always quietly supported Mark. But deep down, Ruth couldn't shake the feeling that their family, their business, was about to face a new kind of challenge, one that would test their strength in ways they hadn't yet imagined. As the months passed, life slowly began to find a new rhythm, despite the heavy loss of Mark. Lucas, now fully at the helm of crystal-free storage, was a rising star in the business world, driven by the desire to honor his father's memory. It was at a community networking event, though, that everything changed. There, Lucas met Laya Hayes, an ambitious and charismatic woman with striking beauty and a magnetic presence. She captivated everyone in the room, but it was Lucas who found himself most drawn to her. Laya seemed to understand him in a way no one else did. She spoke confidently about her dreams of success, and Lucas, still mourning the loss of his father, found solace in her words. Laya's ability to charm everyone around her made Ruth feel uneasy, though she kept her concerns to herself. Ruth wanted her son to be happy, and if Laya brought him comfort, she tried to accept it. But something about Laya's perfect facade didn't sit right with Ruth. It was too polished, too rehearsed. Laya spoke often about wealth, luxury, and power, dropping hints that made Ruth's instincts flare. Yet at the time, Ruth pushed those feelings aside, willing herself to trust her son's judgment. As their relationship blossomed, Ruth noticed subtle shifts in Lucas's behavior. He seemed different, more confident, but in a way that bordered on arrogance. The humility and respect he had once shown Ruth were slowly slipping away. Laya, it seemed, was subtly molding him, changing the way he viewed the world. Lucas, once grounded and focused on family values, was now dismissing the lessons Ruth had worked so hard to instill in him. Small comments started to creep into his conversations. When Ruth suggested a family dinner or a quiet evening at home, Lucas would brush her off, claiming that business was more important or that he had bigger, more exciting plans. Laya's influence was clear. She began to steer Lucas toward a life centered around wealth, status, and success in a way that was driven by personal ambition rather than the legacy of the family Ruth had carefully built. Ruth began to feel like a stranger in her own home. Her son, the boy she had raised with love and care, was slipping away, and the person taking his place was someone she barely recognized. The tension between mother and son grew, but Ruth kept her concerns hidden, not wanting to push Lucas further away. But with each passing day, she felt a gnawing sense of dread, a fear that Laya's hold on Lucas was growing stronger. Laya wasn't just after Lucas's love. She was after the legacy of crystal-free storage, the power and control that came with it. Ruth could see the manipulation clearly now, but she was powerless to stop it. Lucas, under Laya's spell, began to see his mother not as a guiding force, but as an obstacle. He became more dismissive of Ruth's advice, brushing off her concerns as old-fashioned or irrelevant. The once close bond between them was fraying, and Ruth felt the weight of it every day. She knew Laya was slowly taking control of not just Lucas, but their entire family, shifting the values of their company, their home, and their lives in a direction Ruth feared would ultimately destroy everything they had built together. The woman who had once been a warm, welcoming presence in their lives had become a cold, calculating force, and Ruth knew that the battle for Lucas's soul was only just beginning. The day Lucas and Laya got married, the grand ceremony was everything Ruth had feared it would be. A spectacle of wealth, luxury, and showmanship, the very values that Ruth had never prioritized. The guests marveled at Laya's beauty and grace, while Ruth sat in the audience, her heart heavy with an unsettling coldness. She had tried to be happy for her son, to smile and celebrate, but as she watched the vows being exchanged, she couldn't shake the feeling that Laya wasn't marrying Lucas out of love. She was marrying him for something else, something Ruth couldn't quite put her finger on, but could feel deep in her bones. The wedding, so perfectly orchestrated, only amplified the growing distance between Ruth and the life she once knew. She had supported Lucas's happiness, but now it felt like her role in his life was slipping away, piece by piece. After the wedding, the changes in their home were swift and stark. Laya, now firmly entrenched in their lives, began to take control in ways that felt subtle at first, but soon became impossible to ignore. What started as small suggestions, redecorating the house, changing the staff, tweaking the daily routines, soon turned into demands. Ruth, once the heart of their home, found herself sidelined. Laya insisted on redoing the decor, replacing familiar touches with lavish pieces that reflected her own tastes. Ruth's presence, which had once been a constant in every corner of the house, began to fade into the background. She was no longer consulted about decisions. Her opinions, once valued, were now dismissed. But it wasn't just the house that Laya wanted to control. It was Ruth's role in the family. Without warning, Laya began making unreasonable demands, telling Ruth that she could no longer afford to keep the housekeepers, and that she, Ruth, would have to take over the cleaning and cooking duties herself. Ruth, though shocked and hurt, tried to remain quiet, suppressing her growing resentment. She felt like a ghost in her own home, watching as Laya maneuvered every aspect of their lives to suit her vision, while her own place in the family was being quietly erased. It was a painful, slow realization. Her son, her beloved Lucas, was no longer the boy she had raised. He had become a man completely under Laya's influence. As the weeks turned into months, Ruth's anguish deepened, her spirit breaking bit by bit as she was pushed further aside by Laya's increasing control. Her once vibrant home, filled with love and warmth, had become a battleground where Ruth was a mere spectator. Laya's influence over Lucas continued to grow, and Ruth, now feeling like a stranger in her own life, watched helplessly as her son slipped further away. The woman who had once been the beating heart of the family, nurturing and supporting both Mark and Lucas, was now relegated to the background, serving as little more than a shadow in her own home. The weight of this isolation began to take a toll on Ruth's health. Her once steady hands now trembled from the stress, and her body, weakened by years of carrying the emotional and physical burdens of her family, began to show signs of strain. Her energy waned, and the pain in her heart mirrored the growing frailty of her body. She knew her time was running out. Her physical health was deteriorating, and her emotional state was unraveling. Yet the hardest part of all was watching her son, the child she had poured everything into, slowly become someone she no longer recognized. Ruth couldn't stand by any longer. She had spent years in the shadows, quietly supporting Mark and Lucas, never seeking recognition for the empire she had built, never once taking credit for the success that had defined their family. But now, with the family she loved so dearly slipping away from her grasp, Ruth knew she had to act. She had to reveal the truth to Lucas, not just about the business, but about the heart of their family's legacy. She needed him to understand that she was the one who had built crystal-free storage, that it was her vision, her hard work, and her sacrifices that had made everything possible. If there was any hope of saving him from Laya's manipulative grasp, Ruth knew she had to open his eyes to the truth. It wasn't just about the company. It was about protecting Lucas from the woman who had twisted his perception of loyalty, love, and family. With her heart heavy and her resolve firm, Ruth decided that the time had come to reveal everything, no matter the consequences. This was her last chance to save her son from losing himself, and she would do whatever it took to protect the legacy she had built. One evening, with the weight of years of silence pressing on her heart, Ruth knew it was time to confront Lucas. She called him into the living room, her favorite chair feeling unusually cold as she sat, gathering the strength to speak the words that could change everything. When Lucas entered, he looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and concern, sensing that something was different. Ruth took a deep breath, her voice steady but filled with emotion as she finally revealed the truth. "Lucas, I need to tell you something I've kept hidden for far too long. Your father was a brilliant man, and I loved him dearly, but it was me who built Crystal Free Storage. I was the one who started it, who worked tirelessly to grow it into what it is today. Your father managed it, yes, but I made the critical decisions behind the scenes. I did it for you, for our family, because I wanted to make sure you had a future, even if it meant letting your father take the public credit." Lucas stood frozen, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief as the weight of her words sank in. "What? But Dad always told me he was the one who built everything. I thought you supported him." Ruth nodded, her heart breaking. "I did support him, Lucas. I loved him, and I wanted you to see him as the man who led our family. But I had to let him have the spotlight because I wanted him to feel valued, and I wanted you to grow up proud of him." Lucas's face reddened with a mix of shock and anger. "So all these years, I've been living a lie?" His voice cracked as he struggled to process the revelation. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Mom?" Just as the tension in the room thickened, Laya entered, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the shift. "What's all this? More of your stories, Ruth?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she approached Lucas. "You really think your mother can tell you how to run this family? She's just bitter, Lucas, and trying to cause problems." Ruth's heart pounded as Laya's manipulative tone took hold of the room. But this time, Lucas didn't immediately buy into her words. He looked from Ruth to Laya, his expression hardening as he began to see the cracks in Laya's facade. "No, Laya. I need to hear my mom out. You've been lying to me," he said, his voice steady, but filled with disappointment. Laya's face faltered for a split second, the mask of confidence slipping as Lucas's words struck her. Ruth could see the fear flicker behind Laya's eyes, but it was too late. Lucas was no longer the man under her spell. He saw through her manipulation, the way she had weaved herself into their lives to control him, to control everything. The anger and hurt that had built up over the months now flooded through Lucas as he finally understood the truth about the woman he had trusted. "I can't believe this," Lucas muttered, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and betrayal. He had been so blind, and now he had to face the truth. He had been manipulated, and it had cost him his relationship with his mother. Lucas stood motionless, torn between the woman who had raised him and the one he had fallen for, the weight of betrayal crushing him from both sides. His chest heaved as the truth settled in, and without a word, he turned sharply and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Ruth watched helplessly as her son disappeared into the night, her heart breaking with every step he took away from her. As the sound of his footsteps faded, Laya turned, her eyes blazing with fury. "You've made a huge mistake, Ruth," she spat, her voice cold and venomous. "You think you can tear everything apart with your little truth? You've ruined everything. I will make sure you regret this." She stepped closer, her presence dark and threatening. "I'll make sure Lucas sees you for what you really are, a desperate, bitter woman trying to hold on to something she's already lost. This isn't over." With one last glare, Laya stormed out, leaving Ruth standing there, the weight of the battle ahead pressing down on her shoulders. As the door slammed behind Laya, Ruth stood frozen for a moment, the echo of her threats still hanging in the air. But then, something shifted within her, an undeniable surge of determination. "I won't let her destroy everything," Ruth whispered to herself, her voice steady but filled with a newfound strength. She knew what she had to do. For her son, for the legacy she had built with Mark, for the family that had been her world, Ruth vowed to fight. She would confront Laya, protect Lucas from her manipulation, and reclaim what was rightfully hers. No more secrets, no more lies. "I will protect my family, even if it means facing the woman who has torn us apart," she thought. As she stood there, a quiet resolve filled her heart. This wasn't just about business. It was about love, loyalty, and the truth that would bind them together once again. The battle had only just begun, and Ruth was ready to fight for the family she had always cherished. This story of Ruth, Lucas, and Laya explores the powerful themes of love, manipulation, and the relentless fight to preserve family legacy. Ruth's quiet strength and unwavering love for her son stand as a testament to the sacrifices mothers make for their families. But when manipulation enters the picture, it challenges the very foundation of their bond, forcing Ruth to confront harsh truths and fight for what she's built. As Lucas grapples with betrayal, he's forced to make a choice between the woman who raised him and the woman who has tried to tear their family apart. The story reminds us that loyalty, honesty, and love are the pillars that hold a family together, no matter the obstacles. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more compelling tales that explore the complexities of life and relationships. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.